So without further ado, I would like to introduce our guests. We have Marishka, who is here on behalf of the Political Science Department, here to talk a little bit about what department services are being available for the fall and winter semester. And we also have Professor Chris Cochrane. Most people would know him from teaching Full B50. And if you would like, you can please introduce yourselves as well.
Did you want to go ahead, Marishka, introduce?
Oh, okay, sure, yeah. So hi everyone, I'm the program coordinator for the department. I recognize some of the names. I think we've been conversing over email regarding course selection. So my role here is specifically to help you navigate completing your programs within the department, to talk about opportunities that our department offers, and any questions that you have regarding registration as well. So I'm here to help with that.
And I'm Chris Cochrane. So I'm the Associate Chair of the Political Science Department. And also, as Farah mentioned, I teach Political Science B50, which is the sort of second year course that everyone goes through. And so I'm here today to answer some questions about student engagement on the part of the department. But also to talk a bit about B50 and how the course has changed and what I sort of anticipate the fall and winter semesters to look like in that class.
Right, so that's great. That's great. So without further ado, we're gonna start off with the first round of questions. So the first question goes to both Professor Cochrane and Marishka. So due to the situation with COVID-19, a lot of students are abroad. What measures are professors and the Political Science Department taking to ensure classes are accessible for all students?
Chris, can I take this one first? Yep. So prior to everything going online, our department actually came together with all the different faculty members to talk about this and trying to make it as accessible as possible. So there are a number of our courses are offered in the two different delivery modes this year. So some are asynchronous versus synchronous. We've tried to spread the courses that are synchronous at various different times. So to try and make it more accessible for students that are in different time zones than the Toronto time. And as well as offering a number of asynchronous courses as well, where it's not particularly required for a student to be online and engaged at a particular time as well too. So that's kind of what we've done in terms of spreading out the number of courses, and hopefully I haven't heard any feedback yet regarding it, so I think it's working in that sense. But if any of you, again, in the Q&A period have any questions about courses that particularly core courses that don't fit in your particular schedule, then we can address those issues as well. Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Marishka. So we in B50 are entirely asynchronous, for example. So there's opportunities to attend in real time and ask questions in real time, but everything is recorded. So people who can't attend for whatever reason are able to consume the information later. The course in general is really, as you can imagine, it's a complete redesign. We don't have tutorials in the traditional sense, but what we will do in the fall is have drop-in opportunities for students to come in and talk about or ask questions about or get clarification on things that were covered in the asynchronous components of the class. So really right now, this summer, for example, office hours have been serving that purpose for the most part. So we've tried to do everything to ensure that the course is as accessible as possible so people can consume the information in the class in all kinds of different formats. So obviously a laptop, it goes without saying, but also everything is accessible by a phone, for instance, for those who have access to that. And where there is no requirement to attend anything in real time, people have a chance to sort of work the class in and around their schedules. And one of the things that I can say from the course so far is that engagement in the class has been very high, and we get to see when the videos are being watched, and it's been very typical of a sort of traditional course in the sense of engagement. So people are watching the material asynchronously, and they're not, as I've seen in years past, binge watching 24 hours of lecture content in the sort of last week or two of the class. So it's really been consistent and spread out throughout the summer. So I'm really sort of reassured by signs I'm seeing so far about access in the summer course.
That's great, thank you. The next question is for Marishka. Could you discuss how course enrollment has changed in comparison to the previous years? And you touched a little bit about this in your last answer, but could you also explain how you see synchronous courses looking in the upcoming year?
Yep, sure. So course enrollment is definitely a little bit different this year. I mean, the process is still the same with Acorn, but there's two different delivery modes that we're offering in our department. Everything has been moved online, but your course may either be synchronous or asynchronous. So synchronous, again, it means that it's happening in real time. Students are required to kind of block that space off in their calendar. And you'll kind of notice that as well on Acorn, that for your synchronous courses, they'll actually appear on your timetable, but the asynchronous courses, they don't hold a spot. So yeah, that's kind of the different modes and the differences in enrollment this year. Sorry, your second question, Farah?
Could you explain what synchronous courses would look like?
It's going to kind of vary from faculty members. But for the most part, the attendance of you being online is required. Faculty members may be just recording, maybe lecturing live, or they may be doing some kind of other media in a live format, which may require some kind of engagement from students to participate in the class and ask questions. But that essentially the idea is that you would be online for that dedicated amount of time, just as similar as to you would have to attend a particular lecture on campus if it were in person.
Thank you.
So the next question will be for Professor Cochrane. So we wanted to know what does your course structure look like? So for your course such as POBI 50, and how has it changed since working remotely?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it was a humbling experience really to start the course this summer and realize that everything I'd been doing and tinkering with, for 8 or 9 years had to be reconsidered from the ground up. And so just in terms of the sort of pedagogy of the class and how it's changed, one of the things, and I had some experience with this through failed experiments in years past of trying to move components of the course online or give students flexibility to get the material online, and it didn't work. Like I sort of monitored what had happened, and it just didn't work and on every measure. So this year, I really had to give it some thought. So I talked to a lot of colleagues who have been doing online courses elsewhere, and came up with a system to try to ensure consistent engagement throughout the year so that, even though there's no requirement to consume or watch the lectures or attend any of the discussions in real time, there's a strong incentive to keep up on the material. So that was the first change. The second change is that in some ways the teaching in the class is more by the book, in that one of the sort of textbook teaching strategies with respect to assignments is a so-called scaffolding approach, where there's different components of the same assignment due at different periods throughout the year. And at each sort of juncture, students receive feedback and can integrate that into the next stage, and then receive feedback and integrate that into the next stage. And everything culminates in in a final project. And that's the design of the course this year. So there are no exams, there were no midterms, all of that's been changed, and the focus of the class has been on a series of assignments leading to a challenging but not overly onerous and not overly extensive research assignment due at the end of the year. So it is entirely different. One thing I would say about the class is that, again, having never done it before, we had a sort of a design where for each week of course content, we would have one YouTube video and 1 hour of asynchronous, but I called them discussions initially, but they were lecturing over slides with an opportunity for students to ask questions. And I had no idea, was that going to be too little or too much? And it turns out to be a lot more space. It covers a lot more content in that space than I was able to cover in a week of a traditional lecture. So that format, if anything, is probably more than I probably should have pitched, but it'll continue anyway into the winter. So it'll be per week will be a, you know, sort of around a 15 to 25 minute YouTube video thereabouts, and also, or, you know, asynchronous, just pure lecture video, introduction to a topic and so on, and then a recorded discussion with students that will be usually around an hour, usually a little bit more than that, and that will cover slides and so on. So that's been the overall structure of the class. So the big change is the lack of tests. There's a weekly quiz, but there's no final exam and there are no midterms.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question for you, Professor Cochrane. Upper year students in our association have noted that in the past, your course has been very interactive. How have you found students interacting with your course content with it being online? And how has this changed your experience teaching the course?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, it's been less interactive. There's no doubt about it. I mean, in part, it's the asynchronous component that makes it less interactive. So ensuring accessibility and flexibility to people in different time zones and so on is a challenge. Office hours, again, which are at a fixed time, so maybe not everybody can attend, so they can set up an appointment. But even though they're available to groups of students, which has often been a nice opportunity to get discussions going and crosstalk going and people asking questions that other people might have, you know, maybe forgot to ask or not thought to ask and so on, that hasn't unfolded in the summer as I would have, you know, might have anticipated. So we'll try to find a way to build that in. And so a lot of I would say a lot more so than in a traditional year, the interaction in the course has been directly me with specific student at one point in time, and then me with a different student at another point in time. So that group dynamic hasn't been as you know, as sort of as extensive as you would typically see in B50. We'll find a way. We're going to integrate in the winter semester. Like I mentioned, these sort of opportunities for students to come together and just talk about the content, and it won't be recorded. So there'll be a series of different times students can come, and we'll have sort of discussion questions oriented around them. So not exactly tutorials, but analogous to tutorials, which I think will give students more opportunities to interact. You know, again, it's a bit of there's pros and cons associated with it, but in the slideshows and over Zoom, even though people are there, they're asking questions in a chat box, which we have a chance to address at the end of this class each week. It's not like in the winter where or I should say, not like traditionally where you're interacting in real time. There is a difference for sure. There's some advantages and some disadvantages, but I'd say that level of interaction has declined in the course somewhat. And we're going to try our best to find ways to elevate it in the online format for the fall and winter.
Thank you. So the next question will be for Marishka. So since the political science classes are all held online, is the department considering removing the maximum capacity on class enrollment since there are no physical constraints on the class size? And if the maximum capacity are being increased, how is the department responding to the increase of demands?
Okay, that's an excellent question. So we've been monitoring the enrollments pretty closely almost every day since enrollment has begun. Actually, earlier this week, we did increase the capacity on some of particularly our C-level courses that had extensive wait lists. Also, for our D-level classes, anyone that was on the wait list for them should have received an email earlier this morning with alternative suggestions for courses that did have space available. And we've also added a new course for the fall term as well to respond to that demand. So we are monitoring them quite closely. I will say though that we are trying as much as possible to give you a similar experience as you would have received in person. And a part of that is maintaining some of those course caps. Generally, our A and B level courses, the A levels are within the 200s usually per course. B level courses are a bit smaller, but really in the C and D level courses is where you have a lot of interaction. So generally our C level courses are capped at 60. We try and maintain that, but we're also mindful that there is an enrollment demand. So we have been increasing those courses. I can say for D level courses, they will not be increasing capacity, but we've added more courses, or we've highlighted to students that are on the wait list the availability of space in other courses, and there are quite a few. So those students have been emailed in that light. In terms of student support and how we're managing this increase, with an increase in capacity, that also means increase in TA support. So that is also, we're mindful of that too, in noting that there will be additional support for students with this increase in capacity.
Thank you. This is a question to build off on the last question. It's both for Professor Cochrane and Marishka. We've noticed that there are new types of courses in the political science department that are being offered for the fall and winter year. Could you talk a bit about these courses?
Chris, you want me to take this one, or?
Yeah, did you want to start, Marishka?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can kind of list them out a little bit. The majority of them are within the public law area. So we can start off with the Politics of International Human Rights. It's a brand new course, I believe, with Professor Acorn, Policy 33. We have also another course by Professor Karaman. She's offering a new D level as well in public law. It's comparative law and social change. And I believe Professor Schutzer is also offering a new D level Canadian politics course, the new nationalism in liberal democracies. We did add another course, the politics of equality and inequality in Canada, Paul D55. Unfortunately, that will no longer be offered this year. We removed it as Professor Skogstad will be on leave this year. But those are the three brand new ones that we've added to the curriculum. Chris, would you be able to talk about it a little bit more?
Yeah, so thanks, Marishka. That's excellent. I was glad that you were able to overview them, because I couldn't remember all of the new ones that we'd added, and it's quite a few. So as you can see, we're really building, and have built, I should say, the public law program, and it's moving in the direction of a major. So that'll be hopefully available at some point in the very near future. And so part of that is getting enough courses online to be able to provide that. And there's been a lot of student demand for classes. And there's also sort of increasingly an interest to sort of expand and think more interdisciplinarily, if that's a word. If it isn't, it should be, about what the public law program might look like. So maybe adding a sociology angle, for example, and looking at how it could apply to some of the other disciplines. So that's really moving forward. So that's been a big part of the focus. And we have a computational social science course, which will be coming online, not this year because I'm committed to other teaching commitments, but will be coming online, I expect, next year. So that's something I'm sort of looking forward to as well. And we would like to have an interdisciplinary, more of a coordinated interdisciplinary minor in that area at some point in the near future as well.
That's great, thank you. Just to follow up on that, in the past there's been discussions within the political science department on offering an Indigenous law or politics course, and also interest in hiring an Indigenous scholar. Is that still on the department's radar? Is that still happening?
Chris, you want to talk more about it?
Just yes is the short answer that I would give, and we'll search for that position until it's filled. So I'm pretty sure we're searching. I don't know any differently, and I would expect that we're searching this year. That would be the typical course. So as soon as we fill that position, we will be able to staff that course. So that course will stay on the books until we get the position filled.
That's great. Thank you.
So the next question is for both Professor Cochrane and Marishka. So is there any anticipated changes to your office hours or interest in scheduling one-on-one meetings with students?
So from like a student advising perspective, yes, I've been continuing to do that throughout the summer, and we'll do that in fall and winter as well. So right now, if you would like to book an appointment, you can just email me and we can either meet via Skype or Microsoft Teams. Those are the two platforms I've been using right now. I have a meeting tomorrow to look into a new booking system to try and make it easier for students, where you'll be able to access my calendar and see what spots are available to book an appointment. So I should hopefully have more information about that soon, which I can share. But for now, just a quick email to set up a time, and then we can have a virtual Skype or Teams appointment.
And for my part, it's, I mean, technically the same as any other time. You set certain hours aside through the week where you just make sure you're available. You know, obviously, unless something exceptional happens. But the difference for me has been that I'm usually in my office and available anyway, and that's been a bit of a you know, a bit of a disruption to the routine. So I think maybe we can talk a little bit about it as well when we think of student engagement and how we can move to try to really keep the momentum going that we've seen in the department over the past few years toward a sort of more present, more engaged, and a clearer community in the department, and to try to keep that going despite the fact that we're not all in the same place. So that, I think, will factor in discussions of just faculty availability and office hours, and you know, potentially envisioning office hours that extend even beyond a single class, right? So having office hours open more generally to students in the department who might be interested in whatever topic it is you're teaching or talking about, where people can come in and have conversations and ask questions around sort of substantive themes of classes and so on, I think would be a model that would be better than the traditional model, which is restricted just to people in a class.
Okay, great. So I'm just gonna skip ahead. This question's from Marishka. Are you able to talk a little bit about the general resources that are being offered remotely through our campus? So maybe a little bit about AACC, the Writing Center, Math and Stats. Do you know if these services are still being offered?
Yes, so I know particularly with academic and advising, they've all gone online as well too. So you can book virtual appointments. I'm not sure what platform they're using. I imagine it would be Teams as well, to book appointments with them. So they're still seeing students as well. I know Health and Wellness is too. They're for student counseling. They're doing virtual counseling appointments as well too. With regards to Math and Stats and the Writing Center, I'm not too sure what platforms they're using, but I believe they've been going online as well. Actually, the Department of Statistics has been offering prior to everything moving online. They did offer online tutoring for students, with one-on-one tutoring as well as group tutoring. So I imagine they'll continue that as well into the fall and winter. Same thing with Writing Center. Generally, like a lot of the student services that are being or that were previously being offered on campus have moved online for the most part. So what I encourage you to do is to visit their websites. They may have dedicated times where students can book particular appointments and connect with them virtually.
Thank you. So I'm just gonna ask a follow-up question. So we're wondering if there's any important information on course enrollment or deadlines the students should be aware of.
Yes, so I mean, all student groups have now begun enrolling. So if you haven't started your course enrollment yet, please do. Important deadlines, I mean, that are coming up more closely in August. So if you are planning on adding up to 3 credits on ACORN per term, that begins on August 6th. If you'd like to take a course on a different campus, starting at 6 a.m. on August 7th, that will also be made available. If you haven't added any courses yet, there's also the registration deadline. That's August 17th. Please do start enrolling in courses if you plan to attend for the fall by this date. And the financial payment deadline is also coming up at the end of August as well. I think they moved that back a little bit this year, but that is August 31st for payment or a successful fee deferral. So those are the upcoming important registration deadlines. And all of this information as well can be found on the registrar's office website. There's a guide, a PDF download, a PDF guide that you can download.
Hopefully we can share those resources after this webinar, whether it's through email or in the chat. But our next question is for both Marishka and Professor Cochrane, and it's about work-study jobs in the fall and winter. Could you both maybe talk a little bit about what these work-study jobs would look like? Are they still being offered?
Chris, I'm not too familiar with the positions. Do you know more about the ones that we're offering?
So I don't. Do you know, Farah, exactly which ones are listed as lines? It's a decentralized process in the department, so it's usually faculty initiated.
Yeah, so I remember seeing earlier this summer semester that there were a lot of research assistants positions being offered by the interest of the professor, and they were being remote. Do you know maybe if there's been success in that? I think Professor Cochrane, I'm not sure if you hired a work-study student, but maybe if you can talk a little bit about what the process is.
Yeah, so this year has been, I mean, we have like an excellent army of people doing research, and part of it was just availability. Like you had really keen students who were interested in doing research, and so I think there's 9 students or so that are involved in that this summer. So it's been a busy summer, and part of that is work study. There's government jobs programs. Some of it's co-op. Like it's a bit complicated. One thing I would say is that the online actually is fantastic for that. There's one thing where it's so much more effective and efficient to have online. Everybody meets at a certain time every week and talks over Zoom and shares screens and shows data, and it's really effective. So that is definitely something that I'd like to see continue. Just one thing to mention about the work study program, it's a really excellent program on the part of the university, and it's helpful for students and faculty alike. One thing I would just sort of maybe be a bit mindful of, both from our department administration standpoint, but also from the student perspective, is that oftentimes the deadlines for applying for work study positions or putting in work study positions are quite a bit before when the position would actually take place, which can make it a bit challenging sometimes for faculty, because you're usually thinking maybe a month ahead, and sometimes you're not thinking 3 months ahead or 4 months ahead. And especially this summer, with the chaos and with everybody sort of imagining what their courses are going to look like and focused on learning that skill set or preparing lectures in advance, I would be interested to know from the work study program what the application numbers look like, because I, number one, think it's a great opportunity for faculty. I think we're actually in a perfect time to use work studies as both an opportunity to do research, but also as a teaching opportunity, which is important for student development. But I also think that it's also possible that the program, because of the timing of it, we would ideally be adjusted a little bit to allow for sort of for more applications for the fall and the winter. So I don't know exactly what my colleagues have put in for positions, but certainly there'll be no question that there'll be positions available in the department, and they will be virtual, so you don't have to obviously be anywhere.
And just to add on that, I know we had, I think this went out for co-op for anyone that was looking for a position for the fall and winter. We were looking to hire a student, particularly for our department, to help out with kind of the technical support, really, in working directly with professors to put out content for courses. So that's something I know that's out there. One other thing I'd like to highlight is we were successful in our renewal of the Beyond the Classroom grant. So that's running this summer right now. We have 10 students that are on placement, and all of their placements are remote as well. And they're receiving, each student receives $1,000 stipend. We're hoping to increase that next year with 15 students participating. So the call for applications will be sent out in the winter for students that want to participate in the program next year.
That's really great. I've heard a lot of great things about the Beyond the Classroom program, so that's really nice to hear. Ashley.
So this will be the last question to end of the discussion, and it will be for Professor Cochrane. So this year we know that you are sitting on the university's student engagement committee. We just want to know, what are your initial ideas on student engagement in the current context?
Yeah, thanks. That's so one of the advantages, obviously, of the traditional year is that the best way to facilitate student engagement is just to be present, right? I think that's just, and everybody's there and we're in the same place, and you just sort of organically have, and not to mention, the initiative and other things that the PSSA has taken in the past to organize events, and all of that is going to have to be, I think, replaced a little bit. But I mean, the elephant in the room this year is going to be the US election. And we certainly will have events organized around that, which will involve considerable faculty as well as student engagement. And I think that, we do need to talk about how to sort of integrate, again, an opportunity for students to drop in and have conversations on a somewhat regular basis with faculty in the department and with each other. And I think the way to do that is to envision something like, your typical drop-in office hours, obviously to be virtual, but it would be open to all of the students who could then, sort of just drop in on the Zoom call, listen to the conversation, and ask questions. So I think we've done that in the past at least 1 or 2 times per semester, and sometimes it would be through the public law program, and other times it would be PSSA, and sometimes it would be even both. And I do think we just need to institutionalize those meetings at a time that's convenient for students around topics that are of interest to students, and that will be, I think, the primary means of engagement this year. I say unfortunately, but I also think there can be benefits to this, in that just because of the tri-campus model, sometimes it can be difficult to get faculty and students to the same place at the same time. And I think this year it'll be easier to do that. So again, pros and cons to the virtual format. But that's my main sort of thought around student engagement. There could be a Canadian election. It's a minority government. I don't mean to make any of you nervous, but there's definitely some turmoil at the federal level. So we could have a 2-election year, which would make things extremely exciting.
I know some professors in the biology department have used Instagram and /Facebook Live. Would you consider ever going live on Instagram, like to just field questions in general from students?
Yeah, I mean, this is when in the original list of questions, one of them was, what are you looking forward to? And I'm looking forward to kind of learning about the 21st century technology from students, right? I mean, I was late to the game joining Twitter. I was late to the game joining Facebook, and sort of, and now everyone's on Instagram. I mean, now you're probably even beyond that. I'm not going into TikTok, so forget it, right? That's my limit. But Instagram, I'm happy to do Instagram. And my daughter has been sort of pressing me, I think simultaneously, not to go on Instagram for fear that her friends will see me there. But also to sort of get with the time. So any of those technologies, I think this is one of the great opportunities from a faculty perspective, is to actually learn, sort of where technological engagement is at, and not to just sort of coast by on what we picked up 15 years ago. So I'd be more than happy to participate in that.
It's great. So thank you for the insight. So on behalf of the LSOU and PSSA, we would like to thank both of you for being here today and making time out of your busy schedules. It was wonderful to have you both here to speak to students on important information in regards to political science courses and the transition to online courses as well. I'm sure the students who attended the event really enjoyed the insights you guys provided and had to say. But before we begin the Q&A session, we would just like to end off with a lighter question for both of you. And the question is, what do you guys look forward to most in this upcoming year?
I think Chris answered. I know you talked about more about the social media just a little while ago. For myself, I mean, I think it's trying to, like similar to kind of Chris, to explore different platforms and different ways to connect with people. I think that's going to be a really important part going into the fall, to stay connected with all of you. I do miss being on campus, and I mean, the university is still trying to figure out plans as well too for the fall and what that means in going back for staff. So I'm not really sure what the fall is looking like as well, but yeah, like trying to stay on top of things and stay connected. I think that's what I'm looking forward to the most.
Yeah, and I mean, in addition as well, I agree, Marishka, that those are really excellent things that we'll learn a lot about this year. And it's amazing how far we've already come. I mean, adding the sort of interactive online layer to meetings is just so important, but we hadn't done that. Even though we were a tri-campus department, we hadn't been very successful. That would take 20 minutes to set up a Zoom call at the beginning of every meeting, and now it's just instantaneous and expected. So that's definitely an improvement. But more substantively for me, I do think it's important to just learn how to engage with different media, and it's important for faculty and important for students. And you know, I think I look back, you know, at some of the projects that I remember really looking at and being impressed with that were coming out of MIT and coming out of computer labs and engineering schools at MIT, and they would have these very technical papers that I found to be almost impenetrable. But then they would also have infographics and videos that accompanied the paper, which explained everything they'd accomplished in their research very clearly and made it accessible to everybody, experts, non-experts, and everyone else. And I think thinking outside the sort of traditional model of how we convey information is going to be something that we're in a way compelled to do this year. And I mean faculty and students. And I think that's going to be to everybody's benefit. We'll be thinking about new ways of conveying content beyond the sort of traditional written format, which will obviously be important, but we'll be adding to that videos and maybe infographics and maybe short, you know, sort of technical, seminars on how to, you know, achieve or do different things. And on the other hand, for student assignments, thinking beyond maybe just papers, depending on how professors choose to handle that, and looking at things like scientific posters and even the production of videos, I think is going to be a great opportunity for students. And just from my own experience, one thing I've noticed at students in the past few years in my own courses and others is that essays are sort of the same as they've always been. Like, you know, you get essays and some people are really great at them and some people struggle with them or don't like them as much. And, you know, the sort of level of essays on average has been pretty constant. But I was really blown away by the quality and creativity of the students in producing posters and scientific posters. Even though there was some anxiety associated with it because it was new, the output was just spectacular. I was extremely impressed with the quality of the output. And now we're adding videos, and I don't know what to expect in terms of how students will handle producing videos to convey content. But I really do expect to be extremely impressed because students are so technologically sophisticated with new media and other things that I think giving an opportunity to show these skills in a university setting to convey content and engage with content is going to be a real big improvement in the university that'll last beyond the pandemic year. So that's probably the sort of, on an intellectual and pedagogical level, the thing I'm looking forward to the most.